They forgot my birthday for years, so I erased them from my will you. Know that feeling when you're waiting for someone to remember something important about you, and the silence just gets louder and louder. That was my life for 15 years, 15 birthdays that came and went like any other Tuesday, while I sat there pretending it didn't matter. But it did matter. God, it mattered more than I ever wanted to admit. My name is Sarah, and I'm 73 years old now. I've got silver hair that refuses to stay put, laugh lines that earned their place through decades of forcing smiles, and a story that I've been carrying around like a stone in my chest. Today, I'm finally ready to tell it, because sometimes the only way to heal is to speak your truth out loud, even if your voice shakes while you do it. It started innocently enough, the way most heartbreak does. My husband Robert passed away when I was 58, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. We never had children of our own, but Robert's kids from his first marriage had been part of my life for over 20 years. Jessica, Michael, and David. I'd watched them grow up, helped them through college, celebrated their weddings, held their babies when they were born. I thought we were family. I really believed that. The first birthday after Robert died, I understood why they forgot. Grief makes you forget things, makes the whole world feel upside down. I got it. I was drowning in my own sorrow, so how could I expect them to remember that March 15th was the day I came into this world? I made excuses for them, the way you do when you love people and you're not ready to see the cracks in the foundation. But then, the second year came around. March 15th rolled up like it always did, and I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for that text or call that never came. I even went to the mailbox 3 times that day, thinking maybe they'd sent a card. Nothing. Just bills and advertisements for life insurance, which felt like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. By the 3rd year, I started to feel this hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger yet. Not really. It was more like disappointment mixed with confusion. How do you forget someone who helped raise you? How do you not notice that a whole year has passed since the last time you acknowledged that person's existence in any meaningful way? I started marking my own birthdays differently after that. Instead of hoping and waiting, I'd take myself out to dinner at this little Italian place downtown called Mario's. The owner, Tony, always remembered my birthday because I'd mentioned it once in passing. Isn't that something? A man I barely knew cared more about celebrating my life than the kids I'd helped shape into adults. Year 4, year 5, year 6. The pattern became as predictable as the seasons. March would arrive with its promise of spring. The daffodils would push up through the last of the winter snow, and I'd spend another birthday alone, wondering if I was losing my mind. Was I overreacting? Was I being too sensitive? These were questions that kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. The thing is, I wasn't completely cut off from them. They'd call on Christmas, usually, sometimes Easter. If there was a major life event, a graduation, or a new baby, I'd get an invitation. But those felt different somehow, obligatory, like I was a distant relative they felt they had to include, not someone who'd been present for the most important moments of their lives. I remember Jessica's wedding. How beautiful she looked in her grandmother's dress that I'd helped her alter. I'd spent weeks making sure every detail was perfect, every bead secured, every hem exactly right. During the reception, she thanked everyone who'd helped make her day special. Her father, who'd walked her down the aisle even though he'd been gone for 3 years by then, got a tearful mention. Her mother, who'd passed when Jessica was just 12, was remembered with a moment of silence. The photographer, the florist, the caterer, even her college roommate, who'd helped with the invitations, but not me. I sat at table 7, smiling and clapping and pretending my heart wasn't breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. That's when I started to understand something important about invisibility. It's not that people can't see you, it's that they choose not to. They look right through you because acknowledging you would require effort, would require them to extend themselves beyond their immediate circle of concern. And I'd been living in that invisible space for so long that I'd almost convinced myself it was normal. The 7th year without a birthday acknowledgement was when I started therapy. Dr. Martinez was this gentle woman with kind eyes who never made me feel foolish for caring so much about something that might seem trivial to others. She helped me understand that birthdays aren't really about cake and presents and parties. They're about being seen, being remembered, being valued enough for someone to mark the day you came into existence. Sarah, she said during one of our sessions, you're grieving something that never existed the way you thought it did. That's one of the hardest kinds of loss to process. She was right, of course. I was mourning a relationship that I'd built up in my mind, a family connection that maybe had never been as strong as I'd believed. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two completely different things. I wanted to be angry, but I kept making excuses for them. They were busy with their own lives, their own families. They were dealing with their own struggles. Who was I to expect them to remember one day out of 365? But then something shifted in year 8. I was at the grocery store on March 16th, the day after my forgotten birthday, when I ran into my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She's this tiny woman who must be pushing 90, but she's got more energy than people half her age. Sarah, she called out, waving from the produce section. How was your birthday yesterday? Did you do anything special? I stood there holding a bag of apples, completely stunned. Mrs. Chen remembered my birthday. Mrs. Chen, who I maybe spoke to once a month over the fence between our yards, remembered the day I was born. And suddenly, the excuses I'd been making for Robert's kids crumbled like stale cake. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down every single thing I'd done for Jessica, Michael, and David over the years. Every school play I'd attended, every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every late-night phone call when they were teenagers dealing with heartbreak or homework stress, every college tuition payment I'd helped with, every job interview I'd coached them through, every Christmas gift I'd carefully chosen and wrapped. The list went on for 7 pages. 7 pages of love, support, presence, and care. 7 pages of showing up when it mattered. And what did I have to show for it? A handful of obligatory Christmas cards and the growing certainty that I was nothing more than a footnote in there. Stories. Year 9 was different because I stopped waiting. I didn't check my phone obsessively on March 15th. I didn't make multiple trips to the mailbox. Instead, I booked myself a weekend trip to Savannah, a place I'd always wanted to visit but never had the courage to explore alone. I walked through those beautiful historic squares, ate pralines from a street vendor, and took a ghost tour that made me laugh out loud for the first time in months. On the trolley tour, I sat next to this couple from Ohio, probably in their 60s, who were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. They asked what brought me to Savannah, and when I mentioned it was a birthday trip, they insisted on buying me dinner at this charming restaurant overlooking the river. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, and they treated me like I was the most interesting person they'd ever met. You know what I love about you, Sarah, the woman, Karen, said as we were finishing dessert. You decided to celebrate yourself instead of waiting for someone else to do it. That takes real strength. Her words hit me like a revelation. I had been waiting. For 15 years, I'd been waiting for validation that might never come. Permission to matter that I should have been giving myself all along. That night, in a hotel room overlooking the Savannah River, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my lawyer. Now, before you think I'm some vindictive old woman plotting revenge, let me explain. When Robert died, he left me everything: his life insurance, his retirement accounts, the house we'd shared for 23 years, and a substantial portfolio of investments that he'd built up over decades of careful planning. We'd always intended for his kids to inherit a significant portion of that wealth when I passed away. It seemed natural, the right thing to do. But as I sat there in Savannah, watching the moon reflect off the water, I realized that inheritance isn't just about money. It's about legacy, about passing something meaningful to people who will value it, cherish it, and remember where it came from. What legacy was I creating by leaving my assets to people who couldn't even remember I existed? For one day a year, my lawyer, Mr. Patterson, had been handling my affairs since Robert's death. He's this patient man who never rushes you and always explains things in terms you can understand. When I walked into his office 2 weeks after my Savannah trip, he could probably see the determination in my eyes. I want to change my will, I told him simply. He nodded, pulled out a fresh legal pad, and asked what modifications I had in mind. That's when I explained about the birthdays, about the years of being invisible, about the realization that I'd been giving my love and resources to people who didn't value either. I want to leave everything to charity, I said. Education scholarships for kids who've aged out of foster care. They know what it's like to be forgotten. Mr. Patterson didn't try to talk me out of it, didn't suggest I was being hasty or emotional. He just asked if I was certain, and when I said yes, he started drawing up the paperwork. There's something powerful about putting your intentions down in legal language, making them official and unchangeable. It felt like I was finally taking control of my own story. Year 10 came and went, like all the others. No calls, no cards, no acknowledgement. But this time, I didn't feel that familiar ache in my chest. Instead, I felt something that might have been relief. I'd stopped expecting anything from them, which meant they couldn't disappoint me anymore. I started volunteering at the local literacy center, helping adults learn to read. There was this woman, Maria, who was probably my age and had immigrated from Guatemala as a young mother. She'd been too busy working 3 jobs to learn English properly, too proud to ask for help until her granddaughter offered to teach her. Every week, she'd bring me homemade tamales as a thank you gift, and she never missed an opportunity to ask about my life, my interests, my dreams. "Miss Sarah," she said one day as we were working through a particularly difficult passage about American history, "you are like my second family here. You make me feel like I belong." That word, belong, hit me harder than I expected. When was the last time I'd felt like I belonged anywhere? When was the last time someone had made me feel like my presence mattered, like I was more than just a convenience or an obligation? The answer was sitting right in front of me. This woman, who barely knew me, saw my value in a way that Robert's kids never had. She remembered details about my life, asked follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned weeks earlier, and treated every moment we spent together like it was important. Year 11 was when I started getting creative with my birthday celebrations. I decided that if no one else was going to make my day special, I'd become an expert at doing it myself. I hired a photographer and did a portrait session, something I'd always wanted but never felt worthy of. I booked a cooking class and learned to make pasta from scratch. I bought myself jewelry, not expensive stuff, but pieces that made me smile every time I looked at them. Each year, I'd pick a new adventure, a new way to honor the fact that I'd made it another year on this planet, despite everything trying to convince me I didn't matter. I went wine tasting in Napa, took a pottery class in Santa Fe, learned to paint watercolors in a little studio downtown. Every experience taught me something new about myself, about what I enjoyed, about who I was when I wasn't trying to be what other people needed me to be. But here's what I didn't expect. The more I celebrated myself, the more other people started noticing me. My instructor at the pottery class, Jim, always remembered to ask about my latest project when we ran into each other at the coffee shop. The woman who owned the art supply store started setting aside supplies she thought I'd like. The mailman, Carlos, started commenting on my garden and asking for tips about growing tomatoes. These were small interactions, brief moments of connection, but they added up to something that felt like community. I was building a network of people who saw me, who remembered me, who valued my presence in their lives, even in small ways, and none of them were obligated to care about me. They chose to. Year 12 brought a moment that almost broke my resolve. Jessica called me in February, just a few weeks before my birthday, to tell me she was getting divorced. She was crying, scared about the future, worried about how she'd support her 2 kids as a single mother. We talked for over an hour, and I found myself slipping back into my old role as the supportive stepmother, offering advice and emotional support and even a financial loan to help her get back on her feet. For a moment, I thought maybe this crisis would remind her that I existed, that I cared, that I'd always been there when she needed me. I thought maybe this time would be different. March 15th came and went in silence. She called me again in April to update me on the divorce proceedings and to thank me for the loan, but there was no mention of the birthday she'd missed just 3 weeks earlier. It was like those 2 dates existed in completely separate universes, with no connection between them at all. That's when I realized something crucial about human nature. People don't forget the things that matter to them. They might forget appointments, or grocery lists, or where they put their car keys, but they don't forget the birthdays of people they truly care about. Not year after year. Not when those people have been significant parts of their lives. They forgot because I didn't matter enough to remember. It was that simple and that devastating. Year 13 was my breaking point. I'd been carrying this hurt for so long that it had become part of my identity, part of how I moved through the world. I was the woman whose stepchildren forgot her birthday. I was the invisible one, the afterthought, the person who existed on the periphery of other people's lives. But I was also 71 years old, and I was tired. Tired of making excuses. Tired of hoping things would change. Tired of giving my emotional energy to people who couldn't be bothered to acknowledge my existence for one day a year. That year, instead of planning some elaborate birthday celebration for myself, I did something different. I wrote them a letter. Not an angry letter, not a guilt-inducing manifesto, but a simple, honest explanation of how their consistent forgetfulness had affected me. I told them about the years of waiting by the phone, about the trips to the mailbox, about the growing certainty that I was invisible in their lives. I explained that I didn't need grand gestures or expensive gifts, just acknowledgement that I existed, that my life had value, that the day I was born was worth remembering. I mailed the letter on March 1st, giving them 2 weeks to process it. Before my actual birthday, I thought maybe, finally, this would be the wake-up call they needed. Maybe they'd realize what they'd been doing, or more accurately, what they hadn't been doing. March 15th arrived with unusual weather for the season 1 of those perfect spring days that makes you believe in new beginnings. I spent the morning working in my garden, planting the tomatoes that Carlos had helped me pick out. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Michael, the middle child, the one who'd always been the most thoughtful of the three. My heart jumped, thinking that maybe the letter had worked. Maybe he was calling to apologize and wish me a happy birthday. "Sarah," he said, his voice tight with irritation, "I got your letter. Look, I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings, but you need to understand that we've got our own lives, our own families to worry about. We can't be expected to remember every little thing. Every little thing." That's what my birthday was to him. Every little thing. "I'm not asking you to remember every little thing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm asking you to remember one day a year. One day that marks the fact that I exist." "You're being dramatic," he replied. "It's just a birthday. You're acting like we've abandoned you or something. Just a birthday. Just the annual celebration of the fact that I'd made it another year, that I was still here, still part of this world, still deserving of acknowledgement and care. Just the one day when I hoped the people I'd loved and supported for decades would take 30 seconds to remember I existed." "You're right," I said quietly. "You haven't abandoned me. You've just forgotten me. And maybe that's worse." I hung up before he could respond, and I knew with absolute certainty that my decision to change my will had been the right one. These weren't people who would treasure my legacy or honor my memory. These were people who saw me as an obligation at best, an inconvenience at worst. The next day I called Mr. Patterson and made my will changes official. Every penny, every investment, every asset would go to the Children's Education Foundation, specifically earmarked for kids aging out of foster care. Kids who knew what it felt like to be forgotten, to be invisible, to wonder if anyone in the world cared whether they lived or died. Years 14 and 15 passed quietly. I stopped expecting anything from Robert's children, which meant I stopped being disappointed when they delivered exactly nothing. I focused on my volunteering, my hobbies, my small but meaningful connections with people who actually valued my presence in their lives. I also started mentoring some of the older kids at the foster care facility, teenagers who were getting ready to face the world alone. There was this girl, Aisha, who reminded me so much of myself at that age. She was smart and funny and desperately trying to pretend she didn't need anyone, that she could make it on her own without any help or support or love. "Miss Sarah," she said one day as we were working on her college application essays, "why do you spend so much time with us? You could be doing anything else with your life." I looked at this beautiful, broken girl who was trying so hard to be strong, and I saw myself in her eyes. "Because you matter," I told her. "Because everyone deserves to have someone who remembers their birthday, who celebrates their achievements, who believes in their potential. And sometimes, the people who are supposed to do that job don't show up. So other people have to step in." She started crying then, these quiet tears that she wiped away quickly because crying meant weakness and weakness meant vulnerability. But I saw her, really saw her, in a way that no one had seen me for far too long. "When's your birthday?" I asked. "October 12th, she whispered. "I'm putting it in my calendar right now," I said, pulling out my phone. "And not just this year, every year, because you matter. Aisha, your life matters, your dreams matter, and the day you came into this world definitely matters." That October, I threw Aisha the first real birthday party she'd ever had. Nothing fancy, just cake and pizza and a few gifts I'd carefully chosen based on her interests and dreams. But she cried when she saw the table decorated with balloons and streamers, when she realized that someone had taken the time to make her day special. "No one's ever done this for me before," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Well, they should have," I replied. "And from now on, someone will." Now here I am, at 73, telling you this story because I want you to understand something important. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family that will love you the way you deserve to be loved. Sometimes you have to create your own family, piece by piece, from the people who choose to see you, to value you, to remember that you exist. My legal family, the people who will inherit Robert's wealth when I die. They're not his biological children anymore. They're the kids I've mentored, the young adults I've helped transition out of foster care, the people who understand what it means to be forgotten, and who promise to never let it happen to anyone else if they can help it. Last month, I got a call from Mr. Patterson. Apparently, Jessica had been asking questions about my will, wondering about her inheritance, making plans based on money she assumed would be hers someday. He wanted to know if I planned to tell them about the changes I'd made or if I wanted it to be a surprise when I passed away. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted them to know, wanted them to understand the consequences of their choices, wanted them to realize what their forgetfulness had cost them. But another part of me, the part that's finally found peace, didn't want to give them any more of my emotional energy. "Let it be a surprise," I told him. "They've had 15 years to show me I mattered to them. They chose not to. Now, I'm choosing how my story ends. And you know what? I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt or disappointed or invisible. I'm free. Free from the weight of other people's expectations. Free from the prison of hoping for love that was never going to come. Free to spend my remaining years surrounded by people who actually want me there." Tomorrow is March 15th again, my birthday, and this year, like every year for the past few years, I know exactly who will call me. Aisha, who's now a sophomore in college studying social work. Maria from the Literacy Center, who still brings me tamales and updates about her grandchildren. Carlos, the mailman, who always remembers to ask if I need help carrying groceries. Mrs. Chen from next door, who'll probably bring over homemade soup and want to hear about my latest art project. These people, who have no obligation to care about me, choose to make my life richer just by acknowledging that I exist. They've taught me that love isn't about blood relations or legal connections or shared history. It's about showing up, paying attention, and deciding that someone else's happiness matters enough to put in the effort. If you're listening to this and thinking about someone in your life who might be feeling invisible, someone whose birthday you might have forgotten, someone who's been there for you but who you've taken for granted, please don't wait. Pick up the phone, send a text, write a letter. Let them know they matter to you before it's too late. And if you're someone who's been forgotten, someone who's been waiting for acknowledgement that never comes, someone who's made yourself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into spaces where you're not wanted, I want you to know something. You have the power to change your story. You don't have to keep waiting for permission to matter. You already matter. You always have. Start celebrating yourself. Start building relationships with people who see your value. Start creating the family you deserve, even if it looks nothing like what you thought it would be. Because life is too short and too precious to spend it invisible to the people who should love you most. My name is Sarah. I'm 73 years old, and tomorrow is my birthday. And for the first time in 16 years, I can honestly say I'm looking forward to it. Comment below and let me know about a time when someone remembered something important about you when you least expected it. Sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference. And if this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. We all need reminders that we're not invisible, that we matter, that our stories are worth telling.